They told her the charges would disappear if she stayed quiet. She didn't stay quiet. The night it started, Reina Solberg had been on her feet for 14 hours. She was 31 years old, a combat nurse who'd done 2 tours in Afghanistan before trading desert sand for the antiseptic smell of a level I trauma center in Billings, Montana. Her left knee had a titanium plate in it, courtesy of a roadside explosion outside Kandahar, and on nights like this one, after a double shift, it burned the way she imagined a brand felt going into skin. She was driving home on Route 87 when the lights came up behind her. Blue and white, strobing in the rear view. Reina checked her speed. She was under the limit. She signaled, pulled to the shoulder, and cut the engine the way she'd been trained to do in defensive driving. Hands visible, window already down, no sudden movements. Old habits. The kind you keep even when you've been awake since 4 in the morning and your knee is screaming and all you want is your bed. The officer approached from the rear. She watched him in the side mirror. Young, wide shoulders. The way he walked told her something before he ever opened his mouth. Chin up, pace slow, like he was in no particular hurry because he didn't need to be. Lice and registration. Not good evening. Not do you know why I stopped you. Just the demand, flat and immediate, the way you talk to someone when you've already decided what you think of them. Reina reached for the glove compartment. Slowly, he said. She paused, looked at him. I'm reaching for my registration, I said slowly. She pulled the documents out with 2 fingers and handed them over along with her license. He took them without looking at her and walked back to his cruiser. She sat in the dark and listened to the highway and thought about the patient she'd left 3 hours ago. A 22-year-old with a collapsed lung who'd made it, barely, because of a call she'd made that the attending had initially pushed back on. She thought about how exhausted she was. She thought about her knee. He came back 4 minutes later. Step out of the vehicle. Reina turned to look at him fully. Can I ask why? Step out of the vehicle, ma'am. Officer. She glanced at his nameplate. Strell. I just worked a 14-hour shift. I'm a registered nurse at Billings Regional. I have a service-connected disability in my left knee, which makes it difficult for me to, ma'am, out of the vehicle. There was a quality to his voice. Not loud. Just immovable. Like he'd already written the next 10 minutes and she wasn't invited to change them. She got out. The moment her left foot hit the pavement and took weight, the pain spiked up through her thigh and she grabbed the door frame. She didn't make a sound. She'd learned not to. You learn fast in a military hospital that pain is information, not an emergency, and you don't broadcast it unless you have to. But the grab was visible. Anyone watching would have seen it. Strell saw it. Been drinking tonight? He said. No, you sure? Yes, I'm sure. Walk to the back of the vehicle for me. She looked at him. The cold was getting into the plate in her knee now, the way it always did below 40 degrees. She was wearing scrubs and a thin jacket. Her hospital badge was still clipped to her chest. Her name was on it. Her title was on it. Reina Solberg, RN. I have a titanium plate in my knee, she said, from a deployment injury. Walking is, ma'am, I'm going to need you to walk to the back of the vehicle. She did it. Every step a careful negotiation between her brain and a joint that no longer moved the way joints were supposed to move. She kept her back straight. She didn't reach out for anything. She walked the 12 feet to the rear bumper and she turned around. Satisfied? She said. She hadn't meant it to come out the way it did. Quiet and flat and too honest. Something shifted in his face. I'm going to ask you again. Have you consumed any alcohol in the last? No, I have not. I'm coming off a night shift. I don't drink before I drive. I have a medical condition in my left knee that makes my gait uneven, which I told you before you asked me to walk. She held his gaze. I'm a nurse. I understand exactly what you're looking for, and I'm telling you, you're not going to find it. The cuffs came out before she'd finished the sentence. Later, when she would try to explain it to people, her mother, the attorney, the review board, she would always get stuck at that part, how fast it moved. One moment she was standing on the shoulder of Route 87 with her hospital badge on her chest and her knee burning and her voice completely level, and the next there was cold metal on her wrists and a hand on her arm. And Strell was telling her she was being detained for suspected DUI and obstruction, and she was trying to figure out what obstruction meant, in this context, what she had done that qualified as obstruction, and she couldn't find it. She was placed in the back of the cruiser. Her phone was in her jacket pocket. She didn't reach for it. She sat with her hands behind her, and she breathed through her nose, and she thought about what she knew, which was this. She had done nothing wrong. She had said nothing wrong. There was a dashcam on the cruiser that had recorded every moment on that shoulder, and the truth had a way of being visible when you looked at the footage. She believed that. She needed to believe that. What she didn't know yet was that Strel had already called it in, that the report he filed in those first minutes described her as erratic, combative, and uncooperative, that he had written the word staggering to describe the way she walked from her car door to the rear bumper, the word staggering. For a woman with a titanium plate in her knee who had walked those 12 feet in the cold without touching a single thing for support. The holding room at the county facility was a color she would later describe as give-up beige. Fluorescent lights that hummed at a frequency just below perception but still got into your teeth somehow. A metal bench, a drain in the floor, the smell of industrial cleaner over something older. Reina sat and she waited. They'd taken her jacket, her badge, her phone. She was in scrubs and her nursing shoes, the thick-soled kind designed for 14 hours of standing, and she was cold. The knee had stiffened in the car ride over, and now it was the kind of locked that meant she wasn't going to bend it easily for the next hour. A woman came in around midnight. Civilian clothes, county land yard, the specific exhausted but professional expression of someone who has learned to leave work at work and mostly fails. Monsieur Solberg. I'm Dr. Fenner. I've been asked to conduct a sobriety evaluation. Reina looked at her. There's nothing to evaluate. I haven't been drinking. I understand. This is standard procedure when I know what it is. She said it without heat. I've administered field sobriety assessments. I've coordinated with law enforcement on DUI cases. I understand the protocol. She paused. I also understand that the officer who stopped me wrote in his report that I was staggering. I want that on record. I have a documented service-connected disability in my left knee. Titanium plate, surgical reconstruction, V records going back 8 years. Whatever gait abnormality he observed was neurological and orthopedic in origin, not intoxication. Dr. Fenner was quiet for a moment. Then she said carefully, "Do you have documentation of the disability with you? It's in my car, which is on the side of Route 87. Another pause. I'll note that in the evaluation, she said. The blood work came back clean. Of course it did. 0 blood alcohol, no controlled substances, nothing that shouldn't be there. Strel's report stayed in the system exactly as he'd written it. At 2 in the morning, a different officer came to get her. Older, heavier in the shoulders. He had the look of someone who'd been a cop long enough to have stopped performing it. No particular angle to his chin, no power in the pace. Just a man walking down a corridor doing his job. His name tag said Durbin. He unlocked the holding room door and stood in the frame. He looked at her sitting on the bench in her scrubs, at the hospital badge they'd apparently decided to leave in an evidence bag on the table beside her, at her knee that was visibly favoring when she stood. "You're a nurse," he said. "Yes. Billings Regional, yes." He was quiet for a moment. "Strel pulled you over on 87. That's correct." He looked at the badge again, then at her. Something was moving behind his expression, but she couldn't read it yet. "There's a couple of things I need to tell you," he said. "First thing is, the dashcam footage from Strel's unit has already been reviewed. Second thing is, I've been doing this job for 19 years, and what I watched on that footage," he stopped, started again. "What I watched is not what's written in that report." Reina was very still. The footage shows a woman with an uneven gait consistent with an orthopedic injury. It shows that woman answering every question calmly and clearly. It shows her walking to the rear of her vehicle under her own power without assistance. He paused. It does not show anything consistent with suspected intoxication, and it does not show anything that I would describe as obstruction. The word landed in the room and sat there. "I've notified the shift supervisor," Durbin said, "and I've contacted the county's internal review office. You're going to be released tonight. Your vehicle has been held at impound, and you'll receive the address and release paperwork before you go." Reina looked at him for a long moment. "What happens to the report?" His jaw tightened. "That's above my pay grade to promise you anything specific. What I can tell you is that it's been flagged." "Flagged," she repeated. "Yes." She stood up. The knee protested. She let it. "Officer Durbin," she said, "I need you to understand something. I'm a combat nurse. I did 2 deployments. I have a disability rating from the VA, an active nursing license, a clean record, and a titanium plate in my knee that I got because I was doing my job in a country where someone put a bomb in a road. She picked up her badge from the evidence bag and held it. I walked to the back of that car because he told me to. I answered every question. I did not raise my voice. I did not touch that officer. I did not do anything that should have put me in this room tonight. Durbin held her gaze. No, he said. You didn't. The call from the county's legal department came 4 days later. Reina was on a rest day, sitting at her kitchen table with coffee and a bowl of oatmeal and a physical therapy worksheet she was supposed to have been doing for 3 weeks. The number was unfamiliar. She answered it anyway because nurses answer unfamiliar numbers. The voice on the other end was smooth in the way that institutional voices learn to be smooth, not warm, not cold, calibrated to neutral. Mrs. Solberg, this is calling on behalf of the county regarding the incident on Route 87. We wanted to reach out and discuss a possible resolution. She set down her coffee. I'm listening. The county is prepared to offer a full dismissal of all pending charges, along with a small settlement acknowledging the inconvenience of the evening in question, in exchange for a standard non-disclosure agreement. The inconvenience of the evening in question. She thought about 14 hours on her feet. She thought about her knee in the cold. She thought about the word staggering in a report that would have followed her name if Durbin hadn't reviewed that footage. She thought about every other person who got pulled over on a dark road and didn't have a hospital badge and a blood work result and a 19-year veteran willing to flag a report. No, she said. A pause, Mrs. Solberg. No, I'm not signing a non-disclosure agreement. She moved the PT worksheet aside. What I'd like is the complete dashcam footage from that night, a copy of the original incident report as filed by Officer Strell, and documentation of whatever internal review process has been initiated. I'd also like the name of whoever authorized the language in that report. The voice recalibrated. I don't think that's... You can tell them I said no, Reina said. I'll be getting an attorney. She hung up. Her attorney's name was Patricia Gould. She was 53 years old, had spent 11 years as a JAG officer before going private, and she had the particular quality of stillness that meant she'd heard worse and was still standing. She reviewed the dashcam footage on a Tuesday afternoon with Reina sitting across the desk from her. She watched it twice. Then she set her glasses on the table and looked at the ceiling for a moment. The word staggering, she said, to no one in particular. Yes, on the footage, I see you walk to the rear of that vehicle in 14 seconds. Even with an obvious gait issue, you don't reach for the car. You don't reach for him. You stand up straight. She picked up her glasses again. That's not staggering. That's a woman with a bad knee walking on cold pavement. That's what I said. The obstruction charge is nothing. It falls apart on first look. Gould turned to her computer. What concerns me more is the pattern. Did you file a VA disability claim in the last year? 2 years ago. Approved. 80% rating. Your employer aware of the knee? Yes. Accommodations on file. I have them. Good, typed something. This is going to get uncomfortable before it gets better. You understand that? I spent 2 tours uncomfortable, Reina said. I can manage. Good looked at her over the glasses. Something in her expression shifted, not quite a smile, but close. Okay, then let's start. What happened next did not happen quickly. This part was important because in the retelling, in the way it would eventually be covered, the way Reina would eventually have to describe it, people always wanted the timeline to be clean. They wanted the moment of truth to arrive fast and decisive, like a verdict in the second act. Real life didn't give her that. What she got instead was 6 weeks. 6 weeks of formal complaint filings and response windows and procedural delays, and a phone call at 11 at night from an unknown number that said nothing when she answered and hung up after 4 seconds. 6 weeks of walking into Billings Regional for her shifts and feeling the particular weight of knowing that somewhere in a county database a report existed with the word staggering next to her name. 6 weeks of her mother calling every Sunday and Reina telling her it was fine, it was being handled, there was no need to worry, which was what she said because it was easier than the truth, which was that she did not know yet how this ended. Gould filed a civil rights complaint with the county on a Thursday. On Friday, Internal Affairs formally opened a case against Officer Strell. On the following Monday, 2 additional complaints against Strell from the previous 18 months were unsealed. Both involved stops on Route 87. Both involved women driving alone after dark. Both had been closed without investigation after the subjects declined to pursue them. Reina read that document 3 times. Then she called Gould. "There are 2 more," she said. "I saw. Were they offered NDAs?" Gould was quiet for a moment. "That's what we're working to find out." The hearing was held in a conference room on the 4th floor of the county building, with fluorescent lights that hummed almost identically to the ones in the holding room where Reina had spent 2 hours in the dark wearing scrubs and a pair of nursing shoes. She noticed that. She didn't say it to anyone. She sat at a table on the left side of the room. Strell sat at a table on the right. He had an attorney too, county provided, a man in a blue suit who had the look of someone who'd prepared for a different version of this morning. The review board chair was a woman named Commissioner Hale, who had reading glasses on a chain and the specific exhaustion of someone who had been hoping the evidence would be simpler than it was. Gould presented the footage first. 14 seconds of Reina walking to the rear bumper of her car on a cold shoulder of Route 87, gait uneven, posture straight, no reaching, no swaying, no loss of control. Then she presented the report Strell had filed. The word staggering sat in the room like something that had been brought in and couldn't be taken back out. Then she presented the VA records. 8 years of documentation, surgical notes, imaging, disability rating. Then she presented the 2 previous complaints. At some point during the presentation of the second complaint, Strell's attorney leaned over and said something in his ear. Strell's face did not change, but his posture did. A degree or 2 of the width across the shoulders collapsed inward, small, but visible if you were paying attention. Reina was paying attention. She was called to the stand in the afternoon. She answered every question in the same voice she'd used on the shoulder of Route 87. Level, accurate, stripped of anything that could be mistaken for performance. She walked the board through the stop chronologically. She described her knee. She described the cold. She described the 14 seconds it took her to walk to the rear of her vehicle and what that felt like on a joint that had been put back together with hardware. Durbin testified after her. He was in uniform. He walked to the stand the same way he'd walked down the corridor at 2 in the morning. No performance in it, no angle. He said what he'd seen on the footage. He said what he'd seen in the report. He said those 2 things did not match. He said it clearly and without qualification, and then he sat back down. The board's finding came 18 days later. Officer Strell's account of the stop was found to be materially inconsistent with the Dashcam record. His description of Reina's gait was found to be inaccurate based on a comparison with her documented medical history and the visual record. The obstruction charge was dismissed in its entirety. He was suspended without pay, pending a formal disciplinary hearing. The county's offer of a settlement with NDA was formally withdrawn. Both of the previous complainants were contacted. 3 weeks after the board's finding, the county announced a policy change requiring all traffic stop reports to be cross-referenced with Dashcam timestamps before being submitted for processing. Not a perfect fix, not the end of anything, but something. A specific procedural change with Reina's name in the file that created it, even if the policy document itself didn't say that. She was back at Billings Regional on a Tuesday night when the news alert came through on her phone. She was on her break, standing in the hallway outside the trauma bay with a cup of coffee and her knee aching in the particular way it always ached at the end of a long shift, and she read the headline, and then she read it again. County officer faces formal charges following internal investigation. 2 additional complainants come forward. She stood in the hallway for a while. The trauma bay was quiet for the moment, that specific held breath quiet that anyone who works in an ER learns to recognize, the one that never lasts. A colleague came around the corner. Younger, 2nd year out of nursing school, still had the particular alertness of someone who hasn't yet learned to pace herself. "You okay?" she said. Reina looked at her, thought about everything she could say, the road, the cold, the word staggering in a document that had tried to rewrite what happened. The 2 women who'd been offered NDAs and had taken them because they didn't know yet that they had another option. "Yeah," she said. "I'm good." She finished her coffee. She went back to work. She had 7 hours left on her shift, a patient in Bay 3 who needed her, and a knee that was going to hurt for the rest of her life, because she'd been in a country where someone put a bomb in a road and she'd survived it. She'd survived this too. That wasn't nothing.